right. Well, I am delighted to be with all of you today. Good. And while these are trying times, we have rolling blackouts, COVID-19, and fires that will not stop us from acknowledging and celebrating women today and the women who have been fighting for hundreds of years for equity. And that's awesome. I get to hear myself too. That's even better. So while the times are challenging and there's much work to do, we're still here standing in front of this 103-year-old trolley. And it really is, the reason we're here is to acknowledge the past, but really to push forward to the team. Let's give them a round of applause for just being, just so amazing and making sure that we could celebrate this hard fought. And by the way, let's not romanticize this. Women were jailed, hurt. Some women didn't get the right to vote in that 100 years and had to continue to fight. And even today, we continue to fight for pay equity and other things that really, at some point, you think, when are we done? We're not done. Every generation's going to fight more, and that's what we're here to celebrate as well. So part of what we're acknowledging today is that on Wednesday, August 26th, we're going to honor the suffrage movement and get more people registered to vote and remind people about the census. Change happens because we get engaged, and we're not just going to celebrate, we're really driving forward. I just want to reiterate that there was nothing, soft or fairy tale-ish about the women who came before us. They fought, they went to jail, some of them were physically harmed. It kept women, people of color, Asian women, Latinas, the indigenous communities, and African American communities continue to fight for their rights. We know right now, literally, our democracy is at stake. So next Wednesday, we're going to do a virtual press conference, and I'm inviting all of you to participate. It's going to be at 11 a.m. with members of the Women's Equality 2020 Leadership Council. All of you can join, and we're going to ask people to wear white or whatever color they want to celebrate, and bring a picture of a woman they're still fighting for or someone who gives them the courage to fight. And then that same evening at Cesar Chavez Plaza from 6 to 7:30, we're going to get into some good trouble, as former Congressmember John Lewis used to say. We're going to march in a socially distanced way, and you're welcome to join us. Now, I've got women here, and I want to say specifically why these women were asked to attend. They either have played a leadership role in the Women's Equality Committee that's really laid the groundwork for this celebration this year, or they have been on the front lines of fighting COVID-19, or both. And one of the things that I've been so struck by during this fight is that one of the hallmarks, I think, of leadership is the ability to collaborate. And sometimes collaboration is seen as a weaker characteristic or a weaker way of approaching change. Collaboration doesn't mean going slow. I think collaboration builds power, and every woman up here I have seen collaborate in ways that would be astounding, I think, to others, but really have pushed the envelope in terms of how we're protecting people with COVID-19, how we're fighting for equity, how we're fighting to make change in our community. So with that, I want to introduce these women. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves as they come forward. But we're going to begin. Our first speaker will be Fernndez, who's the Chief Executive Officer. Our first person that's going to speak is my colleague, Supervisor Ellenberg. And I'm excited to have Susan here today because one of the lenses that she's brought is really putting a highlight on children and families. Lenses matter. Fernndez, who's the Chief of Officer of the Valley Transportation Authority, which, by the way, we've been fighting to get more women and more people of color the ability to contract with large agencies in the LGBT community as well. It never happened until we had Nuria. Our Vice Mayor of Mountain View, Margaret Abe Koga, who's been a champion on many, many issues, including getting more women in leadership across the county. One of our youngest and very productive members of the Women's Equality 2020 Leadership Council, Shri Ravisankar, a Notre Dame High School senior who I want to vote for someday. Judy Minor, Chancellor of Foothill De Anza Community College, who's been helping us dream about remote work. Tweety Nguyen, President of Foothill College, who's looking at expanding childcare. Dr. Marianne Dewan, who's made sure that there have been meals through the schools for families that wouldn't have had them through COVID-19, and making sure we're fighting the digital divide. Leslie Bacco, the CEO of Second Harvest Food Bank, who has been fierce in making sure that every person in our community gets the food and nutrition they need. And Michelle Liu, the CEO of the Health Trust, who's been a leader in many, many ways, but let me just say one, and that is making sure that we're not ignoring seniors who are here, seniors who are in need of support, especially during these times when they could be ignored. And then Pratima Pandey, who is our executive officer, or I just maybe gave you a role change there. She's our director of the Office of Women's Policy. She came in during this time and has hit the ground running. So let me begin with Susanellenberg.
Supervisor Chavez, thank you so much for your bold and brilliant leadership and pulling this together, almost the culmination of a year of celebration and recognition. I'm so appreciative to be your colleague. 100 years ago, women were granted the right to vote. Interestingly, when I was in elementary school, it was never mentioned that only white women were granted that right. And my position of privilege never led me to question or probe more deeply whether it had in fact been granted to all women. As I reflect back now, it is staggering how much of the history and social studies that I learned and literature that I read was presented through a very white, Eurocentric male lens, and most mortifyingly, I didn't even notice. It was only as an older teen and young adult that I began to read and learn about life experiences that differed dramatically from my own. And even a bit later, that I came to understand that so many of the decisions that were made and the institutions and social structures that were created over the course of our history were designed intentionally to ensure the perpetuation of an underclass of Americans largely based on class. Today, that knowledge powers my work and commitment to move my community toward the creation of new systems, toward real justice that lifts up every human being. I'm working and I'm learning, and I think of the young people today, like my daughters and my son, with all that they have learned, how far ahead they are of where I was when I was in high school, and how they are positioned and empowered right now to use their voices, their votes, and their influence to demand justice, to acknowledge the systems that subvert it, and to put themselves and others in positions to effect real, meaningful change. We had to wait for white men to grant white women the right to vote, but we don't need to wait any longer for anyone to insist on a better, more just world for all of us, for every human being. Dream big, fight hard.
Thank you for those inspiring words, Supervisor Ellenberg, and I want to thank Supervisor Chavez, who also serves as our board chair at the Valley Transportation Authority. Good morning. I'm Fernndez, the General Manager, CEO of the VTA, and it could not have come at a most appropriate time that our leader, Supervisor Cindy Chavez, chairing the VTA board when we are dealing with COVID and its impact on transportation, and we're also dealing with the civil unrest and around the killing of George Floyd. So there's all of these things that are happening in the midst of the celebration of the centennial of the 19th Amendment's ratification and our right to vote. Well, you know, interestingly enough, back in 1999, on August 25th, on a rainy day, I was invited to the White House, Bill Clinton's White House, by then Chief of Staff John Podesta, to an event to celebrate women's equality. And at that event, to my surprise and delight, I was presented with the Elizabeth Cady Stanton Achievement Award. I had no idea that I was getting an award. I didn't know who Elizabeth Cady Stanton was. So immediately when I got home that evening, I did some research. And I should not have been surprised, but her great-granddaughter had written a book. And in that book, she tells a story that her mother shared with her of Elizabeth turning her baby daughter over to her husband in the evenings so that she could go out, organize, and get everyone together, all the women together that were behind the movement. Behind every strong man is a man, and that was one confident man. It's not because we want to be there to see it through, but it's because we're bringing all our energy, our strength behind something that we may not see ourselves, but we want to make sure that that path has been paved, that the barriers have been removed, that the obstacles are no longer in the way. So this 19th Amendment celebration is something that not only brings a lot of excitement to those of us who follow the movement, but to all of us who are benefiting from this movement because of the women who had the courage and went through so many different challenges. We can stand here today. Because of what they stood for, we can stand here today. And it wasn't about agonizing, it was about organizing, it was about keeping your eye on the prize. I am not only speaking as a Black woman, but I'm also an immigrant. And I knew that I wanted to come to this country because of the opportunities that were made available to so many that came before me. And I have to say that I have been fortunate, but there are many who are not as fortunate as I am. And we should not lose sight of that fact. So we're gathered here today in celebration, but also in recognition that the fight is not over. So I am delighted, I'm really grateful to join with all of my sisters here today and with those who couldn't be here because we all have to social distance, but are still doing their part. So thank you so much. Keep up the good fight.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Margaret Abekoga, and I'm the mayor for the city of Mountain View. And I'm so delighted to be here this morning with this amazing lineup of powerful women in the county in honor of the 100th anniversary of the women's right to vote. And I want to thank, I like to call her President Chavez, for inviting me and for getting us all together here today. And thank you to Fernndez for hosting us during this pandemic and nationwide civil unrest. I'm proud of how we've quickly come together to provide the largest rent relief program in the county for tenants, a small business resiliency program, and increasing our food, health, and safety assistance to our low-income and homeless populations. We still have much work to do, and it's important that we unite together to lead our community out of these crises, as well as ensure, again, the pipeline of outstanding women leaders continue to be filled. As we mark this milestone anniversary of the women's right to vote this year, we also have Census 2020 underway. As you know, there's a direct connection between the census and our right to vote, as our representation in Congress and other levels of government are determined by our census numbers. We also receive funding based on our numbers, so we need to ensure that we are fairly represented and receive our fair share of resources. And as we are just 74 days from Election Day, I hope that women and all people exercise their right to vote, knowing how hard our predecessors fought for this right. This November election will greatly determine the direction of this nation, so the fate of our country is in each of our hands. I look forward to celebrating with everyone the 100th anniversary of the women's right to vote during this coming weeks, and thank you so much for having me again.
It is truly a pleasure and an honor to stand here today with all of you. My name is Shardashree, and I'm a senior at Notre Dame High School. As the co-chair of the Women's Equality Leadership Council, I would like to take this opportunity to emphasize the importance of voting and civic engagement among youth. But before I do that, I want to thank all women who came before me and created a world where we enjoy certain privileges that our previous generations dreamed of. I would also like to thank all the women leaders who are standing here with me today, working to create a more fair and equitable community. During the week that marks the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, we are gathered to honor women who endured hardships, took risks, and were persistent to fight for limitless opportunities for all of us. In the end, their actions and sacrifices helped shape the destiny of women like myself. So it is an honor to celebrate their efforts and kick off this very important moment in history. With that said, I want to take the time to address the importance of youth civic engagement. As Kamala Harris said at the Democratic National Convention, in this election, we have a chance to change the course of history. In these uncertain times, I envision a world where youth are empowered to drive social and political change. But we can only do that by significantly increasing youth voter registration, candidacy, and civic engagement in the 2020 elections across all levels of government. I believe that youth have so much to bring to the table. We are an incredibly diverse group that has the power to sway the election because we make up a majority of the voting population. When we put our minds to do something, we can accomplish what we want. I think when I say that we are a powerful political force to be reckoned with. I want to end by saying that in recognition of this milestone, I hope we can move forward towards creating a bright future where youth take the initiative to register, vote, and create a just society. Thank you very much.
Greetings, everybody. I'm Judy Minor, Chancellor of the Foothill De Anza Community College District and a member of the Santa Clara County Census Steering Committee. Make sure that everybody gets counted. Thank you, President Chavez, for the opportunity to join this gathering of amazing women leaders. I'd like to use my time to acknowledge and honor a number of women leaders at Foothill De Anza who give generously of their time and talents on behalf of our students and communities. Our trustees, Pearl Chang, Laura Hassas, Priya V. At De Anza, Student Body President, Caitlin Pan. Academic Senate President Karen Chow, Classified Senate President Heidi King, Statewide Classified Senate President Karen Hunter, and Statewide Academic Senate Representative Mayra Cruz. At Foothill, President Tweety Nguyen, Academic Senate President Catherine Marr, and Statewide Academic Senate President Dolores Davison. At Central Services, Association of Classified Employees President Chris White, Coordinator of Communications and Public Affairs Becky Bartendale, Executive Assistant to the Chancellor Paula Norcell, Vice Chancellor of Human Resources Green Novotny, and Vice Chancellor of Business Services Susan Chu. That's a long list, and I am proud of it. And they are just the tip of the iceberg of the many women leaders at Foothill De Anza. These are all leaders who put students first, pave the way for other women leaders, and strive to actualize racial equity at Foothill De Anza. I am honored to be their colleague. Thank you so much.
Có công mài sắt, có ngày nên kim. Có công mài sắt, có ngày nên kim. If you work hard enough and grind that big metal rod, it will one day turn into a thin needle. Greetings, my name is Tweety Nguyen. I'm president of Foothill College. I have the distinct honor and responsibility of being the first Vietnamese American college president in the country. When I was 3 years old, my parents and I fled communist Vietnam, drifting in the Pacific Ocean for over 20 days. We were breathing and living and dying, and many of us were willing to die so that we can live and breathe freely. When we came to the United States, we understood that freedom came with a cost, and we also recognized the incredible hard work that many who came before us People such as the brave women over 100 years ago who fought so hard for the right to vote, and all the people after that with the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, so that all women of color could vote. Voting, the right to vote, is a critical thread in our democracy, the fabric of our democracy, of our country. And it is just an absolute honor for me to be here with such an august group of women to celebrate and honor that right to vote. Because of those who came before us, we are able to lift our voices, to exercise that right to vote. And many of us now are able to not just stand for something, but to run for it, to run for elected office, and even run the office, running organizations, running businesses. The right to vote is a precious, precious right. And it is something that I'm so glad to be here today to remind everyone, the kind of reminder that I do at Foothill College to our students, and that is vote. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Marianne Dewan. I'm the Santa Clara County Superintendent of Schools, and I'm very honored to be here with all of these women leaders. I'm extremely grateful to President Chavez for her leadership, for collaboration, and her support. I'm especially honored to be here today to speak up, to give voice and represent education and our youth as we honor and reflect upon the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage. Over this past year, we have taken time to plan, to host events to raise awareness, and to bring voice to the importance of women's suffrage and engaging youth. The many women who came before us spoke up. Susan B. Anthony, who urged that wherever there is room for a doubt, to give its benefit on the side of liberty and equal rights to women. Remembering that the rule of interpretation under our national Constitution, especially since its amendments, is that anything for human rights is constitutional. Everything against human rights is unconstitutional. She said that we would fight our battle for the ballot all peaceably, but nevertheless persistently, through to complete triumph, when all United States citizens shall be recognized as equals before the law. To our children, young adults, all girls, never doubt that you are valuable and powerful and deserving of every chance and opportunity in the world to pursue and achieve your education, your own dreams, and to share your voice. In honor and recognition of another one of my heroes, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I end with one of her quotes. She said, "Women belong in all places where decisions are being made. It shouldn't be that women are the exception." I hope that you will all join in
throughs, and I met Christina. Christina worked in a coffee shop in a hotel, and she told me, I still so vividly remember that night I got the phone call not to report to work the next day, and that my job essentially was gone. And then she went on to describe how important the food from the food bank had been, and she told me how she was preparing food for her family and all the creative ways she was using food from the food box. And then she went on to tell me how she was taking care of her 93-year-old mom. And then she told me how her neighbors were really struggling, so anytime she had any excess vegetables, anything she could spare, she shared it with them. And she told me, I've never had to ask for help before, but I have no shame in coming to the food bank because it's just what I have to do to take care of my family. And afterwards, I thought a lot about I'd heard a lot about Christine and what she was doing to take care of others, very little about what she was doing to take care of herself. But I also thought about how just emblematic that was of how women respond in a crisis, how they take care of others, and how they show up and do what it takes to get it done. It's so important that all women have access to voting and exercise their right to vote, because women tend to vote for the policies that help us take care of one another and build strong communities. I'm so grateful to be in this community with so many strong female leaders, and like President Chavez said, it's wonderful to be able to work so collaboratively together and to be part of a network of women who show up and do what it takes to get it done. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Michelle Liu. I'm CEO of the Health Trust. As we take a moment to acknowledge the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote, I want to use my time to highlight the contributions of women of color in the suffrage movement. Women like Dr. Pingwa Lee, who is a Chinese immigrant who helped lead the successful implementation of women's suffrage in the state of New York. Women of color like Dr. Lee, they did the right thing even though they themselves did not immediately benefit. And there's lessons in what we have seen from them that apply today. At the Health Trust, a local nonprofit organization with a staff that is majority people of color and majority women, we tried to do the right thing and immediately responded when the pandemic hit our community. Thanks to our incredible team of staff and volunteers, we increased Meals on Wheels deliveries by 500%. That's a 5-fold increase. And like my wonderful women colleagues have mentioned, we did this in collaboration. We had no choice, and it was the right thing to do. We collaborated with some of the incredible women you see today, and we really give our thanks to the women who are the front lines of service. So, as we move forward in honoring the women who came before us and making room for the women coming after us, we need to do the right thing today. We need to complete that census, we need to vote, and we need to continue to serve the community that we love. Thank you.
As I wrap up, I think of a call to action, and I'm reminded of a quote, and I'm going to paraphrase. We, my sisters, are our ancestors' wildest dreams. My name is Pratima Pandey, and I'm the Director for the Office of Women's Policy. And I want to begin by saying that the courageous women who fought the fight are looking down right now and asking us, what are you going to do for the remaining 100 years? It took them 72 years. And it took women like Ida B. Wells and Fannie Lou Hamer who said, I'm tired, sick and tired of being sick and tired, who marched along with Grace Lee Boggs. These are women who did not get their right 100 years ago. And then women like Susan B. Anthony who fought and were willing to get arrested because they showed up to the polls to cast their vote. 3 days Susan B. Anthony. And if you're a geek like me, that story, I'll tell you what happened. My good friend, Margaret Drew, who's a law professor at the University of Massachusetts, wrote on her blog that day, Human Rights from Home, she said, I don't think Susan B. Anthony wants to be pardoned. Well, my friends, last night the Susan B. Anthony Museum put out a statement thanking but rejecting the pardon. You know why? She didn't believe it was a crime for women to vote. It is not a crime for us to vote. And we think of our ancestors. I think of my late maternal grandmother, who when she heard I was a lawyer asks me, when are you becoming a judge? My grandmother, who did not have any formal education, lived her whole life in a tiny village in northern India, had those aspirations from me. Ida B. Wells and the women who marched, who were women of color and knew that they wouldn't get their right to vote, and yet they marched. And Susan B. Anthony, who was willing to get arrested. That's the legacy that I'm asking each one of you to join us in continuing and preserving, protecting, and promoting. That's what we need to do. For young people like Shri who are counting on us, and for those of us not so young, that's the word I use, who have work to do. Our work is not done. We need to get every person counted. Women, girls, and gender-expansive individuals are hard to count. Santa Clara County is one of the few counties in the state, dare I say in the nation, that has a women and census work group along with Dr. Dewan, we set up a youth engagement work group because we want more youth to be registered to vote. But guess what? Getting the right to vote is not the same as exercising your right. So let's work to give people the right to vote, give them the education they need, and get them to the polls. We need to dismantle barriers, we need to make opportunities, and we need to get everyone counted. Today in the pandemic, Santa Clara County has stepped up and has shown leadership in the nation on how we work for all our communities. If we don't get our communities counted, we will not get the funds that we need to recover from the pandemic, and recover, my friends, we will. If we don't get our voices to the polls, we will not be able to make the change that our ancestors walked, fought, got arrested for. So thank you, and I hope you join me in changing.
Let's give them another round of applause. This is amazing. So we're going to now get on the trolley and show off our celebration. But I just want to remind everybody that we're going to be posting invitations to the press conference, the virtual press conference, and to our action. I'm going to ask everybody to do that, and I'm going to ask if you're watching to make sure you please join us. Thanks, everyone. Let's load up.
I'll send everybody the YouTube link, and then you can post it on your.
So Victor, hey Victor.
Victor, Victor, you want to